We're here on a final hearing. Ms. Gutierrez is with us for the department. Ms. King is with us for CASA. Mr. Ingram's with us representing the children. Ms. Lucero is with us representing the mother, Ms. Lancaster, who is with us, and Mr. Warren is with us. And again, we're waiting for Mr. Adams. I'll take a short break until he comes into the waiting room. So I'll be back as soon as we have Mr. Adams. So Ms. Gutierrez, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. The department calls Dr. Stephen Jennings as its witness.
Right.
Your Honor, I'm sorry to interrupt. I had filed a motion for you to speak with Chloe. Had you already done that, or will you do that at the end of the hearing? Or
I have not done it. I'll do it after the hearing, or I could. We'll see. I'll do it. Let's go ahead and get Dr. Jennings done, so he has to leave. Then we'll take that up. Just remind me when we're through with Dr. Jennings. All right. Thank you, Ms. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Your Honor. I ask if the parties are willing to stipulate to Dr. Jennings being an expert in individual therapy and family therapy.
Anyone object?
No objection.
All right. Dr. Jennings will be, court finds he's an expert as to counseling.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Jennings, how do you know Elena Lancaster?
She was referred to me for individual therapy initially by St. Francis.
Okay, and approximately when was that?
Let me see, that was in November of 2022.
Okay, and what concerns did you identify to be addressed with Ms. Lancaster at the beginning?
Okay, at the beginning, we talked about her children had been removed from her home. There had been some issues with her and her daughter Chloe and her mother having an argument that reportedly ended with her putting her hands on Chloe's throat, as reported by her son Bud and by Chloe. And so St. Francis became involved and removed the children and placed them with the other family. So those were my concern, her control of her anger.
Okay, and how did she progress with that control of her anger during the case?
Well, it was up and down. If I go back through my notes, initially she denied that any of that happened. She said, I did not put my hands on my child. I just did the normal child discipline, and she wouldn't go into that, and said that this was all unwarranted. And so there was a lot of initial denial. So we spent the first several sessions just kind of going over the case, talking about the proofs that were there, the statements that people made, her own admitted issues of excessive drinking.
Okay. Now, at some point, did you start providing family therapy to Ms. Lancaster and her children?
Yes, I did.
And was that Kelsey, Bud, and Chloe?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What concerns arose for you during or with the family during family therapy?
Well, in the initial sessions, it was supervision. And so they would work together, and there was just this general understanding. I shouldn't say general understanding. I was very clear to Miss Lancaster that she needed to direct the play with her children so that I could observe, and if she would redirect any negative behavior among the children, any arguing, that sort of thing. And so it would be up and down. Sometimes she would get mad at the children and yell at them. Sometimes there was one time in particular, well, several times I redirected her not to speak negatively of the state or other family members, particularly, caseworkers and the court system in general. And she would sometimes she would be talking to the children, and she would just start telling them how none of this really happened, and that caseworkers and the court system were misinformed, and she would use derogatory verbiage. And I would say, Miss Lancaster, we're not going to talk about that here right now. We're focused on your relationship with the children. And she would get upset, and then eventually she would go back to playing with the children. Some of my concerns initially were that she tended to sort of triangulate with her middle child, Kelsey, meaning that Kelsey would get upset with Chloe. And this case originally started about mom assaulting Chloe. And so her and Kelsey would laugh and tell jokes and spend a lot of time. And Chloe might say something like, well, I'd sure like to get some time with my mom. And, so Miss Lancaster not really understanding how to spend her time with all the children equally, I felt was continuing to create this problem of conflict between her and the children. So those were my initial concerns.
During your work with the family, did an additional, somewhat related concern arise regarding Ms. Lancaster's ability to regulate her emotions?
A couple of different times. She had argued with me on several occasions about, that she had hit her child, that she had choked Chloe, that and if I confronted her with, well, your children said this, she would tend to argue and yell and raise her voice and stand up, and in the room I'd have to ask her to sit back down. One time in particular, I chose to review. We had come to a point where I had some concerns about her ability to watch her children alone unsupervised. So I submitted a request to the casework supervisor, Tim and Marvell Collins, and said that I felt like she needed a psychological evaluation. So they submitted that. I got back the report, and I asked Miss Lancaster, I said, after the children leave, I would like to talk to you about this report and really try to focus on what we need to do for these children to come home with you. And so she stayed back, and I just gave a heartfelt plea for her to accept that these things had happened, and that she needed to not focus on that, but focus on how to repair that, how to start controlling her anger. And she just become very upset about that and started just raising her voice and pointing her finger at me that I didn't know what I was talking about, and and that she didn't do anything wrong. And so I finally just said, oh, okay, I'm really trying to help you, but I would just, if you could focus on those things, admitting what you did wrong, for us to focus on how to repair that, this would go a long ways for you to have more time with your children. We ended up just having to agree to disagree, and then she left. And so then there was a final session on September 6th of 2023, in which we were talking, and again, Miss Lancaster would triangulate with Kelsey a lot, meaning those two would work against the rest of the people in the room. Kelsey, we were all sitting in one room, and there was the three children, mom and myself, and they all had separate chairs. Kelsey, hers was like an office chair that swiveled, and she swiveled around and turned away from the group. And I said, Kelsey, we need you to turn back around. We're talking, and I need you to pay attention. And so she laughed and would kind of, bother the other children and interrupt what they were saying. And she would laugh. And, I finally said, Miss Lancaster, part of what we're doing here is I would like you to redirect Kelsey. I would like to see that you can do that. And, she said, come on, Kelsey, stop. And Kelsey wouldn't stop. She turned her chair back around and put her feet up on the wall this time. And I said, Kelsey, please turn around. And I said, Miss Lancaster, and they started laughing. And, Kelsey just started laughing. And then Miss Lancaster said, look, they're just having fun. You don't have to be so serious about all this. And I said, Miss Lancaster, I really need you to redirect Kelsey. And she goes, look, this is all BS. And she said the whole words. And she stood up and said, you're separating me from my children. You're the one abusing my children. And I said, Miss Lancaster, that's not the case. And I said, would you please sit back down? And she started walking closer to me. And here I am sitting in the chair, and she's towering over me, yelling and pointing. And I said, Miss Lancaster, that's back up. And she just kept yelling, you're abusing my children. And then Kelsey stood up and started walking toward me. So I stood up and I said, look, this session is over. If you can't sit back down, and it just, the whole thing made me very nervous. So I opened my office door to make sure my secretary could see what was going on. And I said, we're done here. I said, this session is over. And Miss Lancaster started yelling and said, you separating me from my children and not letting me see my children in this session right now is another form of abuse. And I said, Miss Lancaster, you've got to go. this is getting out of hand and you got to leave. And I don't like you yelling and screaming in front of the children. And Kelsey was joining in, and it was a terrible situation. After I got Miss Lancaster to leave, and then the other adults showed up to pick up the children, I immediately called and left a message with Tim, the caseworker, and Marvell, very frustrated. I ended up calling all the family members the next day and setting up the next appointment, to which none of them showed up. And that's where it ended.
Now, were there any sessions that went well right before the children were placed back in her household?
Well, after that session, I'm trying to recall, the caseworker told me that they had started back at home, and he said, but before we completely do that, I need you to start back up the family therapy. So we started back up family therapy, and they went okay. I mean, everyone was quiet. Everyone would be what I call guarded. And we had 2 sessions like that where I could remind them of what their goals were that they were trying to work on. And, everyone stayed, I guess, reserved and guarded. And Miss Lancaster redirected them when was needed. And so at that point, I think we had 2 sessions. They were supposed to come back for some more, but they didn't schedule anymore. And from what I understand, they then returned the children, but she did not make any more appointments. Neither did the children, their placements.
Okay. Now, is it your understanding that an incident allegedly happened in approximately mid-December that resulted in the children being taken from being placed for mom?
Yes, if I recall, the caseworker sent me an email stating there'd been an argument or something to the effect. And I'm trying to recall if this was the incident where she had threatened herself. I did not have a session after that, so I'm just going off report from the caseworker. But I believe she was checked into the pavilion after that, and the children had to be placed with other family members.
Since the children were taken from being placed with their mother, have they restarted therapy with your office?
Not family. The child, one child, but has had 2 sessions with me. So,
Have you made any statements about the incident with his mother?
just last week, I had a session, 10 years old, and I asked him, so I understand something happened, and he goes, yeah, my mom just got really upset. And I said, what happened? He said, well, I thought she was going to herself. And I said, so what happened? He goes, well, she didn't, because I hid all the knives. And I said, how did you hide the knives? And he said, I took them outside and hid them in the bushes. And so that's what he told me about the incident.
Now, what concerns do you have currently about the possibility of the children returning to Miss Lancaster's home today?
Well, lack of stability. I mean, she's kind of jumping from job to job. Then the other is, she's in this year, she's been to the pavilion while with her children, attempting to hide, continuing this behavior of how she works with her 2 daughters mainly. Bud is pretty quiet and reserved, but Chloe, is 13 years old. She's tall. She's, if I had to guess, she's probably 5'6", 5'8", and she's 13 years old. And she's probably a little bigger than her mother. And so, if a year before that, her and her mother are becoming physical when she tries to redirect her daughter, and she's continuing to have trouble redirecting her daughters, my concern is that she's going to continue this type of altercation with her daughter where she argues and puts her hands on her. That's my primary concern. And then you complicate that with the ability that she might, hide or attempt to commit or create those situations where a 10-year-old child has to be the reasoning, the sense of reason in the room to remove weapons so his mother doesn't hurt herself. That's no place for a child to be raised.
Now, Dr. Jennings, has anyone informed you that Chloe made a partial retraction of the events that led to removal?
Yes.
Okay. And are retractions common with child victims?
Yes, they are. They're very common, particularly after a child's been placed in St. Francis or CPS care or with another relative. And, time goes by and they miss the freedom they had maybe in the previous setting. And they tend to forget about the negative things that were happening, and they want to go back to what they knew. And it's very common. Very common to recant.
In your expert opinion, if a child partially retracts, would you still be able to rely on the initial outcry?
I would, considering there was corroborating evidence.
Do you believe that in this case, there's corroborating evidence to the initial outcry that Chloe made?
Yes. I mean, the daughter made the outcry, the son made the outcry, and even Elena, in denying it, described how she put her hands around her throat, saying it wasn't that bad. I didn't push that hard, making those kind of statements. I mean, she admitted it herself. So, I mean, it was very, very obvious it happened to me.
Pass the witness.
Sarah?
Dr. Jennings, I'm just gonna get right to the retraction by Chloe. You stated that it's common for kids to recant or retract what they said. And I understand that, but that's not always the case, is it?
Not always.
Okay, so it is possible that she recanted because she was not being truthful whenever she made that initial outcry, correct?
I don't agree with that.
You don't think it's possible?
Not at all. There's too much evidence.
Okay. Now, as far as you understand, and I know that a criminal case is different from like the type of case that we have now, but you understand that all charges against Elena were dismissed nearly 10 months ago, back on March the 15th of 2023.
I understand.
Okay. And would you agree with me when you meet with someone and they've always stated, hey, I didn't do what they said. I might have done something, but I didn't do what they said. Would you agree with me that it can be very frustrating for folks around them to be pushing them to admit that they did what the charges were? Does that make sense? I know that was a long question, but do you understand what I'm saying?
I can see how that would be frustrating. Yes.
Okay. So now as far as you stated on the family therapy, there was a point, I know that you said there was some bad sessions, things like that, but then you stated that the last, I guess, couple of sessions after the kids were placed back with Elena, she was able to redirect them in a certain way.
Yes, ma'am. In my office. Yes.
Now, whenever, let's say Elena finished a therapy visit with the kids and they would leave, how would it be that they would set up a new, the next visit? How would that go?
Okay. So where we were having our visits were in the back of the building, and there's only one hallway out. And as they go out, I would always instruct them, make sure you make your next appointment with the secretary. And they had done this for the last year. So,
Right. Now, and as far as Mr. Koval, would he check in with you to see, ever so often while you were providing this treatment to either to Elena or the kids? Would he reach out to you? Or how often would he reach out to you to see how things were going?
At least once a month.
Okay. Now the kids were placed back with Elena in October. Is that your understanding?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Did Did Mr. Coble reach out to you or Ms. Collins reach out to you anytime in October to see how the therapy visits were going once the kids were placed back with Elena?
Yes, he did.
Okay. Did you advise them that they had not been attending the therapy sessions or hadn't set any up?
Yes, ma'am, I did tell him.
When was the last session that you had with Elena and the kids?
Last session I had with them was September 6th.
Okay. So did Mr. Coble check in with you in October as to see how the sessions were going?
1 second here. Let me just check a few things. The reason it's a little confusing is because Bud come by himself sometimes. And so, so could you ask your last question again?
Yes. In October, I'll just go ahead and put all the months out there. October and November, did Mr. Coble or Ms. Collins reach out to you to see how the family therapy sessions were going?
Yes, they did.
Okay. Did you advise them that only Bud was attending sessions, but the family therapy was not, no sessions had been set up?
Correct.
Okay. Did, and I'm not saying it was your responsibility, anything like that, but whenever Bud would come in for his sessions, how many sessions did Bud come to see you after, in October and November and going forward?
So Bud saw me on September 27th.
Okay.
And then there were no more appointments until January 17th.
Okay. And then, all right. So in October, when you didn't hear from Mr. Coble or Ms. Collins about if there was any kind of family sessions going on, you weren't seeing Bud and you weren't seeing the family. Is that correct?
I heard from Tim Koval. I did not hear from Elena or any of the other family members.
All right. And again, you did advise Mr. Koval that no sessions were being conducted, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, you'd stated earlier that you're concerned of regarding Elena's lack of stability going from job to job. When was the last time you talked to Elena about her job situation?
In September. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And were you aware that she had held a job for approximately 8-9 months, cutting hair? Had you discussed that with her?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did she ever discuss with you that she was running into issues with her job due to trying to get the children picked up after school and getting back to work, things like that? Did she ever discuss that with you?
I believe she said that it was that her company worked with her.
At any time, Dr. Jennings, while the family was in session with you, did you ever ask Elena whether or not she had choked out her daughter? Do you recall?
Yes, ma'am. I did.
Okay. So you said that statement in front of her kids, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And she denied it, didn't she?
She denied it. Yes, ma'am.
And isn't it true that at one point when the kids were when the family was in session with you, that I believe it was Chloe was kind of acting up, and you told her that if she didn't straighten up, she was going to stay in foster care? Do you recall that?
I did not put it that way. That's the way Miss Lancaster reworded it. I told her that if she continued to act up, we weren't going to meet the goals of what we were trying to do. And if they wanted reunification to happen, I needed them to progress in the counseling.
Okay. And I understand that. And when you're talking about them, you're talking about Elena progressing, the kids progressing, them progressing together, correct?
That's correct. Yes, ma'am.
And would you agree with me that sometimes Chloe, she does tend to act out?
Chloe wasn't the one acting out. It was Kelsey.
In your sessions, in family therapy with the family, did y'all ever discuss whether or not the kids wanted to go home with their mother?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And did you get a feel for did you believe that they wanted to get back home with their mom?
About 4 months into the sessions, they started verbalizing that they wanted to go home. Yes.
And then was it your understanding that Miss Lancaster has been the kids' primary caretaker throughout their lives?
Yes, ma'am.
And even though maybe there was some clashes there in the sessions, would you agree with me that that Miss Lancaster loves her children, or could you get a feel for that?
Well, defining love is rather difficult, but I would say she does want to be with her children.
I'll pass the witness.
Dr. Jennings, Ms. Gutierrez told me that you had somewhere you had to be at 10:15. Is that correct?
Well, 10:30, sir. I was trying to give myself 15 minutes, but I've still got about 15 minutes.
Okay, we'll try to get through. If not, we'll just if they need you back, we'll recess today and come back at another time. So, okay, Mr. Adams, questions?
Your Honor, just a couple.
Okay.
Dr. Jennings, during your counseling sessions with the kids and Miss Lancaster, did the subject of their father, Toby Warren, ever come up?
I believe in the initial session when I was kind of drawing out a little map of the family, Miss Lancaster mentioned it, but she said he wasn't really involved.
Was that all that was really said during your sessions about Mr. Warren?
Well, there was another session where Miss Lancaster was defending that she had drank a lot of alcohol. And so when I was talking to her about taking accountability, and I mentioned to her, I said, Miss Lancaster, you yourself told me in an individual session that you had a problem drinking too much alcohol. And she said, well, that's not my fault. It's my previous, I forgot what she said, husband or boyfriend's fault, referring to him, to Toby, that he abused me. That's why I drank.
Okay. But you didn't follow up with that at all?
No, those were the only two things I can recall her saying about Toby.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. Ingram?
No questions.
Ms. Gutierrez, anything to follow up?
No follow-up, Your Honor. We ask that Dr. Jennings be released.
All right. Does anybody else have follow-up questions for Dr. Jennings? Ms. Lucero, briefly.
Briefly. My question is, before you meet with Elena, before you meet with the family, do you get reports from the department and other folks to prepare for sessions, or how does that work?
Yes, ma'am. They generally send me a affidavit of removal in which I'm able to go over the information. I'm just looking through here real quick. They sent me a referral, and it goes through and it talks about what services they would like, what some of the behaviors were that led up to removal. I'm just looking through this in a second. Yes, it just talks about what the goal is, that sort of thing, eventual family reunification.
All right. And let me ask, whenever you receive that affidavit of removal, do you take it that everything inside that affidavit, everything set out, do you consider all that to be true when you first meet with, like, for example, Miss Lancaster?
No, ma'am. I usually read it to the client and let them make their statements about that's true, that's not true, that sort of thing. And we review it. Anything they say is not true, then as we go through, if it's relevant to treatment, then I would try to find out if that's true or not.
Okay. But in this case, you believe the allegations that she tried to choke out Chloe? Is that true or not?
I did not accept that to be true based on just what a report said. I based that on what the two children, Chloe and Bud, and Elena herself said.
I'll pass the witness.
Any further questions from anybody for Dr. Jennings? All right, then. All right, Dr. Jennings, I'll go ahead and remove you so that you can go about your day's business. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Department calls David Connor as its witness. Okay, and did you investigate an alleged incident regarding Elena Lancaster and her 3 children in December of 2023?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Do you have the exact date of that incident?
On December the 11th.
Okay, could it possibly have been December 10th?
Yeah, actually, yeah, because I actually got involved on the 11th. So yes.
Okay, great. Can you tell me in general what resulted in you getting involved in this family?
Since it's a temporary managing conservatorship case involving physicals or any kind of use at the time, the SI division takes primary as investigators on those cases, and so it was assigned to me since the state has custody of the children.
What were the initial allegations that you were provided?
The initial allegations were for neglectful supervision against the children.
Okay, and based on that, you met with the family and the kids on December 11th, is that correct?
I actually met with them on December the 11th.
Okay, and did you interview both Kelsey and Chloe?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And did the girls speak together or were they interviewed separately?
Well, we were in like a 1-bedroom type apartment thing. They were interviewed separately. I didn't talk to them at the same time.
Okay, did both girls give the same account?
For the most part, yes.
And what was that account?
Your Honor, I object to hearsay.
Overruled. You can answer, sir.
Okay. The account was that they were trying to get a cellular telephone from Elena, their mom. When I was told that because they could go out with friends, whatever else, mom would not give them the phone, and therefore they decided to assault her. As I was told, they were punching her in the face, pulling her hair, and choking her in order to get the cellular telephone.
And what did the children say the mother did next?
They said that she was able to get away from them and threw spice bottles at them, and they showed me like a spice bottle, like a garlic spice bottle that's a plastic container that was thrown at them, and said that she then went into the kitchen and grabbed a knife and said something to the effect of, I obviously cannot raise y'all properly, so I just might as well kill myself.
Okay, and did the girls state that it was videotaped?
Yes.
Were you able to obtain a copy of that videotape?
No, ma'am, I was not.
Were you able to view a copy of that videotape?
No, ma'am, I was not.
Did the children inform you that the cops were called
Yes.
and that the mother, Elena Lancaster, was admitted to the pavilion?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you also speak with the child, Bud?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And can you tell me about that interview?
It was said that he grabbed several knives from the kitchen, including the one that was being held by Miss Lancaster, and ran downstairs and hid the knives in a bush outside before law enforcement arrived.
Did he show you the location of these knives during your interview?
Yes, ma'am, he did.
And can you describe generally where this location was?
Yes, the house that they're in is like an apartment over a garage area in the back property of the main house. And so it was going to be run along some bushes along a fence line next to the street, adjacent to the apartment house where they were at. And it was up on a brick ledge that has like a metal wrought iron fence around it, and the bushes were behind that, and they were inside the bushes.
approximately how many knives were hidden back there?
4.
And what size were those knives?
The one knife that had a serrated edge that was told me that's what she was holding. The blade length was approximately 5 to 6 inches in length. There was also a butcher knife that again was also approximately 5 to 6 inches in length. There was a paring knife, and then there was also another knife that was there.
Now, it took you a couple of days, but did you also interview Elena Lancaster?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And was that delay due to her being in the pavilion?
Yes.
And how did she respond to the allegations?
Her response to me on numerous occasions was, whatever my children told you is the truth. And she said, my children don't lie. What they told you is the truth.
And was there a disposition of reason to believe against Elena Lancaster for this incident?
Actually, no. We actually did a rule out disposition on Elena Lancaster, and that was determined between myself and the my program director.
Okay, and what was the reason for that determination?
We kind of had to take the whole multitude into this due to the
1 second. Judge, I think we lost the mom.
Your Honor, she texted me, she said it said it's trying to reconnect.
Okay. All right, we'll wait for her here for a few minutes. All right, Ms. Lancaster's back with us, so as soon as we have Ms. Taylor back with us, we will proceed. Okay, Ms. Gutierrez, you can proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. David, let me ask you a different question. Do
Okay.
you believe the events described by Chloe and Kelsey were a dangerous situation for them?
Do I believe it was a dangerous situation for them?
Yes, could it have been a dangerous situation for them?
Absolutely.
Okay, and the actions that Bud described of hiding knives with one of them, how big was the largest knife?
The largest knife, I believe, was going to be the serrated knife that she was holding. Like I said, the blade was approximately 5 to 6 inches in length.
Okay, and do you believe that that was a dangerous situation for Bud?
Yes.
I'm going to object to speculation, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Pass the witness.
All right, Ms. Lucero.
Yes, Mr. Connor, you were asked, but we broke off for a bit. Why did the department rule out the referral?
Let me read what we put on here. Part of the main reason says no information was obtained that Ms. Lancaster threatened the children with the knife or placed them in immediate risk or injury during the suicidal threats. Also, based on the fact that law enforcement did not file any charges against Ms. Lancaster or the children for what took place. And the sole thing going with law enforcement was the mental health issue for the threats.
And just to be clear, you stated there was no allegation that Ms. Lancaster did anything to the kids. It was actually the girls beating up on her. Is that right?
Yes, that's what I was able to find out.
And you found that out by speaking with all 3 children, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I'll pass the witness.
All right, Mr. Adams.
No questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Ingram.
No questions.
Ms. Gutierrez, anything follow up?
Nothing on follow-up, Your Honor.
All right, if everyone's through, then can Mr. Connor be excused?
No objection.
No objection.
Okay. All right, Mr. Connor, thank you for your testimony. I'll remove you so you can go about your day's business.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Your Honor.
I'm sorry, Teresa. I was just going to remind the judge that Chloe was waiting whenever he's ready to speak with him.
Okay, she's not in my waiting room unless who's she placed with?
I believe I received a message from Mr. Coble. She's under I guess Josh Lopez, if he's in the waiting room.
Yeah, he is. We can do it now, or I can do it after we finish testimony. If she needs to get to school or something, I'm happy to take a break and we can visit with her and Mr. Ingram and Miss Orr right now.
I believe they had one. I mean, it was my understanding from prior conversations that she was going to go to school after this was done. So, I mean, that's up to you, Your Honor.
No, that's fine. I'm happy to do it right now. Let me get Joshua Lopez in and be sure that is it just Chloe?
Yes, Your Honor, you just approved Chloe, conference.
Okay, that's right. I remember that.
Your Honor, the department requests that a record be made of the conference with the child.
Oh, yes, sir. Just give us 1 second.
Okay. Judge Graham, I'm going to put us in a breakout room. It'll just be me and Mr. Ingram, your lawyer, and the court reporter, and then we'll visit with us. So I'll open a breakout room. You may be asked to join, or it may put you in there automatically. All right, I'll open the breakout room for all of us right now.